Welcome to Illuminate Your Leadership. I'm Angela Chee, a speaker, communication coach, and host of the Power of the Only podcast. Today, Cisco leaders are joining me from around the world for a powerful and deep conversation, sharing their challenges, their insights, and their wisdom so you can continue to grow and step into your leadership, no matter where you are on your journey. And when I talk about leadership, I'm not talking about a title. All of you are leaders. We have the power every day to make an impact in how we show up and how we connect and how we lead, at work, at home, and in our communities. I know it's been a challenging few years, but you have met these challenges. And all of us, as we continue to navigate our complex and uncertain world, it's important that we continue to look forward with hope. Hope because there is so much opportunity to create what is next together. But how do we move forward? To shift, to evolve, to innovate, and continue to embody Cisco's leadership principles. You may have heard them before, but here is a closer look at who Connie Chung is. She was one of the first Asian American newscasters, one of the only Asian women I ever saw on TV growing up. And she was also the first woman to co-anchor the CBS Evening News. I grew up in the suburbs of Los Angeles, and every time she would come on the local news, we would gather around the TV. I was always fascinated with the power of television and fascinated that there was someone on that screen that looked like me. I remember one day I was 8 years old and my dad says, "Hey, you could be like Connie Chung." And I was like, "Really?" I looked at him and I looked wide-eyed at the screen. Who knew one day I would be? You see, I grew up a shy Asian girl with immigrant parents. And even though my father said to me that day, "You can be like Connie Chung," for most of my life, I was taught to not rock the boat, to play it safe, and to not stand out. My parents immigrated from Taiwan in the 70s, and they left everything behind to start a new life and to pursue the American dream. They worked hard, and they built a good life. But at times, they lost their voice. They lost their voices to fit in. They lost their voices so I could have mine. Their sacrifice is my privilege, and I don't take that for granted. I believe that's why I went into TV news, to have a voice and to help others share theirs. And now as a speaker and communication coach, my mission is to help leaders like you be you amplified, to own your power, to own your voice, and fully step into your leadership. Who gave up their voice so that you could have yours? And what are you going to do with that gift that you have been given? You don't have to be on TV or be like Connie Chung to use your voice, to step up and to lead. You have that power every day to make an impact from right where you are. And today, we are going to help you develop your leadership, seek to improve, and establish your own path. I am so honored to be joined by an amazing global panel of guests, live here in studio and in WebEx. Let's welcome them now. Hello. Welcome. I love that you get to share all parts of yourself, especially here at Cisco. What does vulnerability and leadership mean to you? Thank you for your insights. I know we'll dive deeper into that as well. Obviously, all of us have strengths and technical abilities and different things, but I love that you're looking at that holistic view. What does vulnerability and leadership mean to you? Being in tune with our emotions, I think that's something that all of us have a difficult time with sometimes, right? Because when we want to do something perfect or right or, to the best of our ability, but sometimes it's also really being self-aware of where you're at. But I love that you're giving people different tools in their toolbox as a leader. So thank you so much. I also want to get deeper into, you talked about how leadership and vulnerability, the word vulnerability is a word that can be very confronting. It's about getting hurt, right? It's about putting yourself out there. And it's been a strength in recent years. That word has shifted. But do you think people still have a hard time with it? And how do you help your teams through that? You can talk about vulnerability all the time, but how do you actually make people be vulnerable? Yeah, the last few years have definitely opened up vulnerability, and almost just because we had to, right? And it actually made, I think, teams stronger in a sense when we didn't have to put on that front. Now I'd like to go to Vlad. I know you work, how do you think culture plays a role in that? You work in Japan, but you have Australia, different territories. How does culture go into vulnerability, right, and how people perceive that? Yeah, so important to have that dialogue and that conversation. Jennifer, you work with a lot of teams. You're organizing a lot of things. And you talked about a culture of learning. How do you cultivate that with your teams? Right, just like you said, lead by example, giving people permission, and creating that culture of learning is so important. Now, all of us are at different parts of our leadership journey, right? I'm sure where we were at in the beginning of our career versus where we're at now, and we still have a lot more to evolve. I want to start with going back in the time machine. Do you guys have a breakthrough moment where you feel like things shifted for you, where you felt like Yeah, I'm ready to be vulnerable or take that risk. You know, for me, I was always type A, packaged, you know, I wanted to be a TV news anchor. Everything was perfect. Even early on in my career, I felt like it needed to be a certain way. My hair needed to be a certain way. My talk needed to be a certain way. But then as I've grown into myself, when I became a mom, and also when I left the news business, started an entrepreneurial journey, I actually started to shift and go, who am I? Peeling back the pieces. Was there a breakthrough moment for you? It's in retrospect. I love that you learned the lesson from that. But for those of you listening that are starting off in your career, you know, who you were then, if you were to go back in the time machine, like who were you when you started your career versus who you are now, and what lessons have you learned? And you know, and it takes time, we say, through the journey, but what if we sped up the process? For those of you listening, if we have belief in ourselves earlier on, sometimes we don't have to go through all that, but going through it is part of the process a lot of times. Manpreet, what are your thoughts? If you could go back in the time machine, is there something that you would tell your younger self? Starting out, we always want to do things right. Where if you're starting off as an engineer, of course you want to get it right? You want to impress your boss, impress your teams. It's all about showing I have this credibility, I know what I'm doing. But as we grow in our leadership journey, it really is about pulling back and admitting what we don't know so that we can bring other people together, right? Let other people shine, let other people show their strengths and collaborate with them. And I think that's a leadership lesson. So thank you for sharing that and pulling that out, especially for some people that are at the beginning of their careers. And as you move up the leadership ladder, your skill sets change. So thank you for that. Vlad, do you have a breakthrough moment that you remember that things shifted for you? Thank you so much for sharing that story. I'm sure all of us can relate with when you create bigger problems than there are. It's like you got exactly what you wanted, and now you got to actually do it, and we create these things in our mind. So I'm sure people can relate with that. Thank you for sharing that. I think feeling heard, right? It's the basis of all relationships, work relationships, personal relationships, and I think getting back to that core, right? As a leader, we feel like we have to lead, direct, tell, do, even as like a mom, right? You're like, do, but it's actually, can you create space to listen? So thank you for that perspective. And Manpreet, I want to talk a little bit about, you won an award for inclusive leadership, and it said it was an experimental method. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how you can apply that to being a leader? Thank you so much. Now I want to bring it back to vulnerability and learning from our mistakes. How do we, you know, even just admitting our mistakes is step one, right? That's a step. Do you have any tips for people to first just even acknowledge them, but then how do we actually learn from them? Of the constructive feedback, right? That it's difficult. It's not supposed to be an easy thing. If you're actually stepping up into your leadership, you want the best for that person. And sometimes that requires some conversations, having those difficult conversations. So I appreciate you bringing that. Before we wrap up, I want to just quickly, we have some minutes of what's the one takeaway you want people to walk away with today? If you were to kind of summarize everything, what do you want people to take action on? Really being aligned is, you know, and that's what I stand for with you Amplify. Is who are you? How do you want to show up in the world? What do you believe in? And how are we going to show up for ourselves and for our teams and for everyone here at Cisco? So thank you so much for all your insights. And before we wrap up our full session, Seek to Improve, How to Embrace Vulnerability and Learn from Mistakes, I want you to think about how you are going to apply what you learned here today. What's one action you can take immediately? What are you committed to doing differently after hearing today's stories and insights? What do you want to do more of? Maybe what do you want to do less of? How can you continue to inspire others? I want you to write it down and to really think about it. How do you want to show up? Who are you? What do you believe in? And how do you want to show up in the world? I know there were so many insights and takeaways, but start with one of them and then continue to think about how you can be a leader that is always seeking to improve. It's been an honor to be with you today to help you own your voice, own your power, and to step into your leadership. Some people believe in order to grow, you need to change. I believe you already have everything you need inside you to succeed. You just need to discover it and amplify it. To you and your voice, I'm Angela Chee. From all of us, thank you for joining us for Illuminate Your Leadership.